Hello, Nicole. Welcome to Tales from the Trail. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
If you don't mind, just introduce yourself to our audience and let us know what it is you do.
I'm Nicole Broussard. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Dudley DeBosier Injury Law Firm here in Louisiana. Uh,
Now, as you know, part of our thesis is that every business and organization is on a mission to deliver some kind of value into the world. What is it that Dudley DeBosier is trying to do for us mere people of Earth?
for a long time, Dudley DeBosier had a tag and it was changing the way people think about attorneys, one case at a time,
Okay.
essentially. And I would say that's probably what we're trying to deliver. That would be different. Um, you know, there are other firms that make their bread and butter through insurance companies, right? And arguing and basically settling with the insurance companies. And we
Uh-huh.
want to make sure that in our work that we are doing right by the client, in that we won't just settle with an insurance company. We're going to do right by them. If their case warrants us fighting, going to trial, we're going to do that. We're going to push it to make sure we have the right outcome for the client, and that's our focus. That's what makes us different.
Okay. And so that's how you're changing people's perspective of attorneys. So let's just go through a typical client scenario for you. So someone gets hurt in a car accident and then they pick up the phone and call Dudley DeBosier. Is that the process?
That's right. So, I would say the bulk of our cases are auto. We would call them auto. They are automobile accidents. We also handle other types of personal injuries, right? So you've got your slips and falls and your trips and falls and things like that. Dudley DeBosier does also handle some business law and maritime medical malpractice, things like that. We also deal in mass tort.
Okay, got it. So within that process of someone getting in an accident,
Yes.
calling Dudley DeBosier, Dudley DeBosier validating, I suppose, their case, taking on the case, and then you mentioned earlier, ultimately making a decision at some point in the process whether or not this case is going to end up going to trial or being litigated, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
That sounds like a lot of logistics, a lot of moving pieces. What do you think your organization was thinking when they decided to embrace Salesforce?
I think that we were looking for a system that would be more robust, allow us to move from what has historically been sort of a fragmented case management environment.
Okay.
So we would have our case management software, then we would have our SharePoint files, then we would have, our phone system here and our texting over here. And so it
Hmm.
was a fragmented environment. And the idea is that we would use the power of Salesforce and the integrations possible with Salesforce to begin to defragment that and ultimately push forward a system that's housing all of our data, right? All of our information, and then be able to do more in-depth analysis of that data. I think that's my goal. That's what I'm hoping to achieve by being on Salesforce. Um,
Got
if
it.
that makes sense. Mhm.
No, that makes a ton of sense. So bringing everything together in one place so you can hopefully optimize it, make it more efficient. And you guys are on a very specific implementation of Salesforce. It's an OEM called Litify,
Mhm.
and an OEMs are typically a package of functionalities that serve a very specific industry. In this case, personal injury law firms.
I will tell you, in speaking with other firms in our discovery process about whether or not to go onto Salesforce, whether or not to use Litify
Hmm.
uh, on Salesforce, I know some firms have chosen to kind of develop their own thing as
Hmm.
opposed to go with Litify. But I think that it was a good decision to do, to use Litify. It's set up, you know, it has a basic framework, right? That does apply to the law firm where you're not having to start from ground zero. So
Hmm.
it's coming with an injuries object, it's coming with a negotiations object, it's coming with these different objects, so that while you do have to customize them to the operations of your firm, it is set up in a way to provide you a framework that you don't have to start from scratch. Um, and we are a support staff driven firm. We contain departments that other law firms I know don't have, our trial department or our medical records department, things like that. And so customizing Litify to the needs of Dudley DeBosier was a challenge, but it was also one that I would consider to have, we succeeded in that challenge in large part, even at this early stage, 6 months in.
Great. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk to you about next. So you went through the implementation process.
Yeah.
And I want you to be honest with me, because this is a area that I really want to shine some light for people who might experience this. What was that implementation process like for you?
Um, so, again, I want to say I do think that it was a success overall, and we can expound upon that later. The process was messy, Drew.
Hmm.
And that was due in part to our lack of knowledge, right? So in our implementation, I served as product owner, right? And so
Hmm.
I'm currently still in that role
Hmm.
for our firm. Which I like that we chose an operations person to serve as product owner for the firm. I think that was the right thing to do, especially like I said, because we are that support department driven model. But you know, it was just a huge learning curve all the way around. And of course, as we geared up for go live last August, I feel like out of my mouth constantly came, I wish I would have known, I wish I would have known this, I wish I would have this and that. And that's fine. But some of the things I wish I would have known. I wish I would have known the full plate of objects and services that Litify itself did provide, because I think we tried to reinvent some wheels we didn't need to.
Hmm.
I also think we tried to work with some wheels that we just didn't need to, right? We could have said, well, let's scrap this. We'll save that for later. It's not important. It's not going to jive with the operations of Dudley DeBosier naturally. It won't be value added. So it was an enormous learning curve. And I think, I said this at LitiQuest last year. To be successful in an implementation of Salesforce, the firm itself must take responsibility for understanding Salesforce and Litify. Must. You can't just rely on your third-party services to do the homework for you, do the research. You have got to come to the table as a full-fledged partner in the process, which of course I tried to do,
Yeah.
right? But even still, it was rough because there's just so much to learn. Again, it was successful. We went live and didn't have to take any steps backward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely, just doing all the education on, the trailhead, and that did not properly prepare me for what the implementation was going to be. And even as chief operating officer, or at the time director of operations, there's just no amount of internal discovery that we could have brought to the table that would have prepared us, I guess, properly in my
No.
mind. But I did my best.
Yeah, no, I hear that, and I'm sure that it was super challenging. So you did go live, and
Mhm.
I know, I've experienced that a few times myself. So give me a picture of what that first month was like, and then you're now 6 months later. So then, what does that sort of path look like? And then
Yeah.
after that, we'll talk about what the next year might look like.
Okay. So I'll just back up even a little bit further. So the summer before, so we went live on August 22nd last year, and the summer prior to that, was really heavy on training to the best of my ability per department, per user group. Essentially, there was just no amount, I think, of training that could have made it just a perfectly seamless process.
Hmm.
Getting the attorneys to the table for training was a challenge, right? And we're a large firm. We're spread out over 7 different office buildings in 6 different cities, and so that was a challenge, right? That could take a whole other podcast to talk about the training
Yeah.
aspect of Salesforce and Litify for a firm that has been traditionally fragmented and on older types of software, or less powerful.
Hmm.
So challenge in and of itself. Now, so 1 month in, it took us a couple weeks to get our bearings to really start processing settlements at the same speed and volume as we had before. But I considered that a win, to be a weekend and the first week processing settlements was a huge win, and I think one that doesn't get enough praise.
Yeah.
We had issues, with speed and volume at which we were processing medical records and things like that through the system. that really kind of set us back for longer than a month. It's taken me a long time to get that particular department back up to speed. But Drew, first month we were processing settlements. We were answering a lot of questions that weren't, they weren't crisis types of questions, right?
Mhm.
There was nothing like totally broken or crazy. It was really just depending on how in depth that user or how seriously that user had taken their training for their department. There were just a lot of unknowns, and people were afraid. And when I say afraid, they were afraid to click the save button or afraid to click the new button or
Mm.
afraid. And it was interesting just saying, like, hey, just work in the system. It's reliable. It's there. If you get an error, just call me. But
Yeah.
there was just a lot of anxiety. And so 1 month in, that was the bulk of our day. And I'd say it probably took us 3 months, Drew, to stop feeling like the Litify team here at Dudley DeBosier and then our partners at Banjax were really stressed. It was
Mhm.
really hard the first 3 months. And then now 6 months in, we all feel excited because we're at a different phase. And again, operations continued at Dudley DeBosier. There was not a break in that, but now we're at a phase where the things popping into the Litify team inbox are suggestions or questions, or maybe why did this happen to me? And we never find anything super scary. We always find, oh, this is why. We can answer that question and we can push you on to how to do it differently next time. And now we're thinking about, iterations more. And
Great.
it's an exciting phase to be in now.
Awesome. Yeah, I see that kind of as the emotional roller coaster of implementation, because you have at the beginning in the sort of sales phase, you have really high hopes of what's possible. Then you go
Yeah.
through the go live, which can be just wild. Uh
Yeah.
so many concerns. And then as you start to get over the hump, you start to think again about those things that you were thinking about of what is possible, what can we do? So it's good to hear you sort of recap that. The
That
last
is
thing
a perfect description of the bell. That's
the
the perfect.
the roller
That's
coaster, yeah.
exactly what we went through.
And I think it's good for people to know that that is the case, so that when they're at the bottom of it, they know that okay, it is going to get better. This is par for the course. I don't know if I told you this, but I spoke to someone who went through a seven-figure implementation at a major company with one of the biggest implementation partners out there. I think it was a $50 million implementation. And so you might think that at that size that they wouldn't deal with that level of chaos. But that $50 million doesn't buy you a perfect go live. What it buys you is they brought therapists and therapy dogs up to the operation to comfort people as they went through the process. That's what you get. So
I
I
can
think,
I can believe that.
yeah. So it's universal. It's universal. There's no getting out of it. Um, the last thing I wanted to ask you is what advice do you have for someone who is earlier on in the process? Maybe they're just starting, or they're thinking about starting, or they're in the middle of an implementation. What kind of advice would you give them?
Um, I I'm going to echo something that I said at LitaQuest, and I still feel this way. I think it's important to choose an operational person to own the implementation, and not rely on your IT department to do that. I know some firms have gone in that direction, but those are the firms that I speak to now who are asking questions about our org and how we got through it. And those are the ones that I feel like, I wouldn't say they have a failed implementation, but they're a year or more in, and still there's a disconnect. And I'm not saying that's because of their IT team. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just saying I think it's really important to make sure that you have an operational emphasis on the internal team chosen to go through the Litify or Salesforce implementation. And it takes an operational understanding of why those exceptions need to be translated into the software or need to be excluded from translation into the software. I think that firms, the ones that I've spoken to who didn't approach it in that way, are the ones that struggle the most after.
Mm-hmm.
And Drew, struggle is just part of the process. But I think the more internal ownership a firm can take of its org, the better. in the process, and you keep asking questions and keep advocating for your firm in the process so that you get the best product possible, and you know what to do with that product once you are past the struggle of go live, right? Because like you said, like there will come a time when you're no longer in the crisis mode or the struggle, and then you need to utilize Salesforce,
Mhm.
utilize the power of it to give your firm what you wanted to get out of it in the first place. So
Right.
not getting stuck in like in the struggle and the crisis is just so important. And continue to research, right? Like Salesforce is Salesforce in general is iterating. Litify is iterating. All the integration partners you may incorporate into your org are iterating. Everybody's changing all the time. And to translate that or to communicate that to your firm and help them understand what that means is really important, right? Because it's so interesting. Like our support departments or our assistants, especially, they like to know how to do something and then they'll repeat that,
Yeah.
right? But it is so there is a disconnect naturally in the tech world when, hey, there's like my phone is updating all the time,
Uh-huh.
everything's updating, and you have to embrace that as the reality now instead of an exception or something we're doing to you.
That's
Like,
right. Yeah.
just is how
Yeah.
so there's a lot of like relation, just like you said with the therapy dogs, like make sure the person you choose as your product owner can at least laugh about that and keep telling the truth to the users, but in a way where they'll still like hug you as you tell
Yeah.
them the hard truth of like, we are in 2023 and everything will iterate every day forever.
Yep. There will always be an update. You will always need a therapist.
And I still tell them that in trainings, you know, in retrainings. I'm like, guys, I get it. I get super upset when my phone has an update.
Yeah.
However, we must update.
Mm.
So
Great. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been awesome spending time with you, and just really love hearing about Dudley DeBosier and everything you guys are doing.
thank you, Drew. All right. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye.